projects, they get locked into. So we're not doing it all the time, but if an agency comes and they need some help and they've got some limited funding, we're willing to figure out how do we make that work and what do we do to do that. Some of these are quick conversations, some of them are longer. I think our folks that we have on staff are as talented as any of our consultants as far as knowledge goes. It's just a time commitment and how do we work that. But most importantly, come to us with your need, your ask, your request, your intention, and we will put together a solution for you and help you work through that to figure out what that means, including the funding conversation of what that does. Constantly, that's number one on everybody's plate is how do we do this? How do we fund this? And what we want to do is get people started. Sometimes we can start with our own staff and then transition to contract support if you see value in it. Other times we go right to contract support because we know it's a longer tow. So all that kind of stuff we will work through. What you're going to hear about today is the offerings that we have put together. Some of these are things that are just there. The WIFM tool, for example, that you hear about was in-house developed. We've had agencies ask us, can you configure it for our agency? Yes, we certainly can. That's in-house staff. We're not going out and hiring somebody to do it. So we can configure it in ways that can help you or address things. We're looking to fill some of those gaps that you see in the programs that we do. All these tools we're doing are, I guess, minimum viable products, if you will. So we're looking for feedback on how we can improve those. You're going to hear some talk about occupancy metrics today. If you think of the UR, the space square foot per person logic that we're all used to, came up about a decade ago that really hit the forefront when people started talking about it because it was easy to touch, easy to digest, and easy to measure and challenge. You got so many people assigned to a building, your building's so big, do the math, spits out an equation. Life is never that simple. And so now when you start looking at frequency of use, type of use, the different types of spaces we're doing, we're looking at a different occupancy metric, which Ryan will go into and give you a little bit further insight into that. But all these pieces, we both need your support on it, but we also would like you to try out and use them. Most importantly is, and this will be my plug, only plug, for the workplace engagements we do. The workplace engagement is us working with agencies, and again, this can be in-house, it could be consulted out, we can make it work, but it's getting with you all to talk through what you're trying to do. Why are we even in this room having this conversation? What are you trying to achieve here? That's number one. Secondly, we do leadership visioning sessions, focus groups with management, with leadership, with employees. We walk through spaces, we talk about the toolkits we have, and together we figure out a solution that works for you all. We're not selling something. We're not trying to reduce your footprint and say, you got to get in this box or else it's not going to work. We're working with you to figure out what's the right answer for your spaces. And that's what a workplace engagement does. And more importantly, it gives you the information when somebody says, well, wait, why'd you go this way? You now have some data, some information to say, this is what informed that decision. This is why we went this way. This is why it makes sense. And so that can be, we're trying to get it as short as possible. It can be a pretty quick process. And then as you move forward, it can be layered on to go further. But I think any agency it applies to. I've said before, the process is right for every agency. The solution varies for every agency. So people back in, when we did the space back a decade ago, people were wowing. It's like, why don't we do this across government? This building would not work for people across government. It was designed and works for GSA. But the process that got us here, the process that informed the kit of parts that went into this building is right for every agency. And that's that workplace engagement process, to have that conversation. It also, for you all, starts to bring in your operators, your stakeholders, and some embedded change management to get them part of that solution, buy into the solution, understanding why you chose to go this way rather than that way, and to listen to them. I was in one meeting with a client, and it was their facility staff, and I said, I go, don't take this personally, but you don't know what your agency does. And the guy was a little upset, and he talked to me afterwards, and he goes, I was upset for about a minute. He goes, but when I thought about it, and as the conversation went on, I couldn't tell you what the CFO staff does 8 hours a day, what they even do for 5 minutes a day. I don't know what they do. I don't know what this group does. I don't know what that group does. All I get is requirements. All I look at is standards. And he goes, that's a real tough way to run a business. What we do is come in and talk to those CFO folks, the operators, the folks that you're providing space for, and ask them as a third party, what is it you do? What is it you're trying to do? And what are you trying to accomplish? And that's where the space conversation starts. 9 times out of 10, we're giving them stuff they don't want or use, but they want something they don't have. And so that one of the exercises in workplace engagement is keep, toss, create. What are you doing? And this definitely applies for the world we're living in now. What are you doing now in your organizations that you want to keep, that you don't want to lose in any of this transformation talk, hybrid talk, and all that kind of stuff? Figure that out. What do you want to toss? What are you doing now? Never made sense pre-pandemic and certainly doesn't make sense post-pandemic. How do we stop doing that? And then what are you doing that you want to create in your operations that you haven't been doing, that you've always wondered, why aren't we doing this? Because it makes us so much more seamless, frictionless, faster, better enabled. And so that keep, toss, create conversation gives a little bit of self introspection, but it also starts to inform the design. That's the beginning of our conversation. We don't lead with floor plans and footprints and requirements. We lead with what are we trying to accomplish, a conversation around the tools we have, which then leads to what an appropriate solution is for your agency. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Ryan to go over some of those cool tools.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right, excellent. Smartest choice today was choosing this Barbie colored tie. I'm super excited about that. What I'm going to be, my name is Ryan Dorfler. I'm a workplace strategist with the Center for Workplace Strategy. And I'm going to be covering, you've heard about it earlier, all the different workplace offerings that GSA provides. One of the key things to keep in mind as I go through, I'm going to highlight these. I'm sure many of you have heard of these before. What I'm going to be doing is focusing on the newer aspects of it that you might not have heard. As we go through the offerings, one key takeaway from this is they can all be customized, just as Chuck mentioned here. The processes, the outputs, you might see some designs as well. They're not locked in. It's that classic one size fits all type of analogy. So as we go through these, I challenge you to think about how these can possibly customize to help you meet, if anything, the first 2 words up there, the space utilization topic. Kind of our favorite topic these days. If anything, most recently in the last 10 days, about 10 days ago, the GAO report came out, GAO 23, 106, 200. Okay. How many of you are familiar with this report or possibly even read it? All right, some of you have. I'm sure some of those that are joining online as well. Essentially what happened is the Government Accountability Office investigated space utilization in the DC area. Okay. Focusing on 24 headquarters buildings and looking at occupancy data for a week in January, February, and March, and compared it to how they calculated the building capacity, if you will. Building capacity, as you see there in the bullet, was essentially calculated by total usable area divided by a rough benchmark of 180 usable square feet per person to come up with a rough building capacity. You compare that with the amount of badging data that comes in, and you get kind of a sense of how occupied or how utilized these buildings were. Now, the report certainly gets into a lot more detail, but there is some really great nuggets of information that comes out of it, which, if anything, helps shape and drive the conversations we have with our client agencies. One of them is, if anything, the primary causes for where we're at as far as utilization. Again, this is just the 24 buildings in the DC area broken up into 4 quartiles, so it's 6 buildings in each. And what you see here is essentially the average utilization level as expressed as a percentage for each of the 6, ranging from 9% building utilization up to a high of 35, again, on the average for that 4th quartile over there. Now, there's a lot of emptiness, if you will, when it comes to utilization, which for me means there's a lot of opportunity and lots of ways we can help your agency explore what that balance of that space could or should be as appropriate for your agency as well. Now, there are some considerations that GAO explored. One of the big ones I do want to highlight is that second bullet on the left is the timing of those leases that GSA holds. So right there, it might be a little hard to see, is like half of GSA's leases. So we're talking about the leases, not necessarily the federal occupancy. Half of GSA leases, roughly 83 million square feet ish, have scheduled expiration dates essentially in the next 4 calendar years. Lots of stuff are happening when it comes to leases. A lot of decisions need to be made. And if anything, to go back to the previous slide, this reflects one more thing that we need to consider as well. Now, GSA is poised to help you with our workplace offerings, which I'm going to cover in a second, to help make those decisions, the timings of those leases, looking at the portfolio of your occupancy in a particular metropolitan market, what other occupancies may or may not exist in other federal agencies, and maybe there's some opportunities for shared space as well. Now, there's certainly challenges that we all commonly face. Budget is certainly one. Another one is just our ability to how malleable those buildings are, how well we can change them or quickly change them to reflect a more modern hybrid type of workplace. But there's also other challenges there that we have a bit more control. Investigating how we share space across agencies or within agencies, across bureaus or within organizations. Also looking at more effective ways of calculating utilization. Now, I was asked to bring up the new utilization or occupancy measurement that PBS and GSA has been exploring. But I'm not going to do that because if anything, where we're doing on the timing, and I'm going to let Victoria correct me if I got the timing wrong on this one, is that the next step, we do have some ideas. And they do take into account those considerations you see there on the right. It goes beyond just square feet per person, which doesn't take into account the efficiency of the space. Is the space even right for that type of work being done? How flexible it is, on and on and on. The new notion that we have as far as looking at occupancy and utilization at the same time does take into consideration the variables that you see on the right. However, I'm not going to share this with you because what we need to do first is share with the Federal Real Property Council first and get input through that more formal mechanism. So you can expect to hear more about this as everything else I'm about to cover. If you have any suggestions on how we can make it better or better serve your agency in a more targeted way, certainly let us know. Did I cover that okay? Excellent. All right. All right. So now we're going to set some context, got some utilization. It was in the room. We had to acknowledge its presence, an occupancy. Now we're going to get to the workplace offerings. Okay. And one of the nice things about technology is last minute slide changes. When Nina brought up transforming the workplace, I was over there on my phone changing this title right away. What you probably didn't notice is right before this presentation, I realized I didn't get access to this computer to show the presentation. So we fixed that as well. Imagine if that technology didn't work. And to get back to the CIO conversation, how important it is to have technologists, and your CIO in the conversation at the very beginning before any plans are even made. Because then those types of things can be certainly considered. Now, our vision when it comes to a federal workplace is to achieve all this fantastic stuff that you see up there. Both modernize and optimize, and they are not mutually exclusive. This can be achieved by us all working together and exploring those different variables that I like to use here that go into an effective workplace. Now, these days in a more hybrid work environment, it really takes the success of everything that you see here along the wheel or the circle to click, to work. Okay, not just the space design and not just the furniture, but also the technology, how organizations click and what that culture of that organization is. And there was a fact, I can't remember, what was the fact about under the age of 30, very small part of the federal population? What was it? 7%. All right, 7% current federal population staff under the age of 30. Well, it would be nice to make that percent a bit bigger, hopefully a whole lot more. So how do we draw them in? How do we make these federal workplaces a magnet? Well, one way to do that is certainly to take a look at all this over here and identify how we can make that workplace perform better. So all of these services, offerings that I'm about to mention, as well as the offerings we've done before, as well as the offerings that we haven't thought of yet, until you give us some input and what we can do better, is all geared around how can we make each of these aspects of this workplace effectiveness wheel be basically work much better. Now, the first tool you've heard about, and I think it's kind of the curse of the catchy acronym, WIFM kind of just rolls off the tongue a little bit. What it does stand for is a lot harder to say. The Workplace Investment and Feasibility Modeling Tool. It was a tool that was created in-house. It's just an Excel tool that looks something like this. How many of you have used WIFM? Actually, open it up. Thank you very much. And you two back in the room. Yeah, open it up. Now, it's just an Excel file. That's all it is. What the power of WIFM is actually the logic behind the scenes, as well as, and so I do lots of training about WIFM, and essentially what it does is you put some information there on the screenshot on the left, and it spits out different charts related to space savings, distribution of space, that kind of thing. And if you find a scenario that works really well for you, you can go into the details, look, see the details, and use that as a starting point for a space requirements discussion or customize it, right? What many of the first-time users with them don't realize is that it's built for customization, not just on the tabs, but also behind the scenes. Now, when I created this tool, I put in certain space allocation ratios when it comes to meeting rooms, how many two-person focus booths, all that kinds of things. I put it in there. I am commonly criticized for being a little too light on support spaces. If you find that the numbers are a little too light on support spaces, you can blame me. I'm used to it. Or the other thing you could do is go into the tool and change those allocation ratios to something that's more in line with your space standards or whatever your space planners happen to use. All of this can be opened up and customized. Okay, and again, as Chuck mentioned, it's intended to guide decision-making. And that's why this version here, think of this as more the 25% version of WIFM. Yeah, it has a 2.0 label on it because the previous one, I won't get into the details, but it has a 2.0 level detail. But what we did is focus on a quick, easy space solution with the idea being adding in greater functionality over time. Now, one of the ones aspect that we are working on right now with the Office of Federal High Performance Green Buildings and their consulting partner, Nobliss, who built the Sustainable Facilities tool. What we're doing is adding in essentially a carbon dioxide equivalent calculator associated with different degrees of telework, taking into account things like working at front home, building emissions. You see all of the sources there that this looks at. This was recently, the draft version of it was recently shown to the Scope 3 community practice, I believe about 2 weeks ago, to get their input as well. The idea being is just like this, as well as the other things we're going to add in, is if you can throw a formula at it and you're okay with it being a rough order of magnitude, it can go into WIFM. And that's the key, is the rough order of magnitude. It's not going to be the single source of hyper detailed calculations, but it will guide you in your decisions. Other things we're going to be adding in there are tenant improvement cost estimates, rough order of magnitude, furniture cost estimates. We'll throw in some rent calculators as well, and why not throw in an ROI curve just for the heck of it. So those are the kinds of things you can expect to see in version 3. Now, I was warned, since this is end of the day after a killer panel, right before everything goes, I was asked to throw in some audience participation. So here's a nice QR code. You could take your phone out. For those of you in the last 4 rows, you will need to zoom into, I think, magnification 9.8. We just tested it. What this will do is allow you to register, take you directly to the Client Enrichment Series presentation that will go through WIFM 3.0, including the sustainability calculations, as well as other ones as well. Okay. Now, if you don't get a chance to do this, or it might be a little too faded in the back row, you're going to see these QR codes quite a bit on the rolling screens, as well as I believe on the front tables as well. Okay. So that's WIFM. That's the new stuff. You've probably heard about the old stuff for a while. There is CES sessions recordings available also. So that's new. Really great stuff. The next thing you're going to hear about is Fast Track Space. Now, this one is, it is the same offering as we've unveiled over the last few. Oh, where you can find WIFM for all of this. Thank you. For all of this, the easiest way to, you can do gsa.gov/workplace. It has pretty much all of these offerings on there, the overview. Or one of the easy things is also just email workplace@gsa.gov. It goes to myself and goes to a bunch of my colleagues as well. And we'll get back to you with information about any of these offerings or anything else that you might be interested in. Okay. Any other questions in the queue? Nope. All right. Fast Track Space. There is a more detailed discussion of that tomorrow afternoon. I think it's, I forgot what time it is. It'll be on the agenda. As a highlight, what this does is recognizing that hybrid work and the nature of essentially the office environment isn't as different as it possibly, the variations aren't as big. What we wanted to do is focus really on how can we, for those agencies who really just want a great office environment for their administrative or knowledge workers, with not a lot of customization, how can we get those requirements done, those DIDs done, as well as make things really easy for you all. Now, what you see here are 4 plans that we've created, and essentially think of them as modules. You can do 2 Model A's with a B, or rearrange it together to create the rough overall floor plate. And each of these models has level 1 and some level 2 DIDs as well. Okay. And we'll get into more details of all of that at the session tomorrow. The one key takeaway I do want to leave here is if you go to the website, the gsa.gov/workplace, or you see anything, is these plans are meant to be improved as we learn more from our agencies, as we learn more about things like neurodiversity and other considerations that we really should be taking into account in these plans. These will be updated over time. Okay. The key on this one is to make it simple, so that way, whatever the plans are, the latest and greatest ones, you can choose them, and then using a very simple tool like this, identify 2 Model A's. Let's see what we got. We got a Model A, B, and C, and an extra just for the heck of it. What the tool does is automatically calculate the space, the utilization rate. This can, again, be customized to whatever your agency standards might be. Also includes a rough order of magnitude tenant improvement cost estimate, which is good when it relates to as far as TI allowance. I'm not going to get into the details of that. I'm going to just throw it out there to entice you to, if you care about TI allowances and RWAs, come to my session tomorrow afternoon, and we'll get into more of the nitty-gritty details of that. After that's done, then we get into a series of steps of customization, finally closing out, basically doing a pack and wrap on all the different requirements package. Okay, it's all about speed and about low cost, but expertly designed. So that's fast track space. Again, a plug for tomorrow afternoon. Now, co-working, I believe Nina mentioned it. I know Chuck mentioned it. We actually have 2 co-working options. The first one that's been around for the last 2 years or so is commercial co-working. Heard about that earlier, essentially going through the private sector to provide co-working space on a temporary basis. An example I heard is like if a pipe breaks and your staff needs to go someplace, pipe breaks in the office and they suddenly need to go someplace else, they can go to this co-working type of environment. It is anywhere in the continental US. But it is in a private sector type of setting. We just receive your RWA, we treat it like a mini service contract, and you're quickly into a co-working type of environment provided by one of these vendors. WeWork being, of course, a vendor, and then also what we call aggregators. An analogy that Chuck used recently that I'm going to start using more often. It's kind of like a VRBO or Verbo, whichever way you like to say it, or a Airbnb type of option. Okay? But in this instance, it's for co-working. Now, the big one that we're, of course, all excited about is federal co-working. Creating a co-working environment, the same business model, concierge, top-notch type of workplace. For those of you who haven't been through the Workplace Innovation Lab, just walk through it and kind of visualize that as a co-working environment. But the nice thing is it's in our buildings, behind our security, restricting access to just the agencies or whatever access controls we want, which creates opportunities for what about a secured co-working environment for only law enforcement agencies, for higher needed security controls, those type of things. Now, we do have prototype locations open right now. Okay. We have 6 of them that are open, and they are purposely different. What we wanted to do is to make sure to get these prototypes out as quickly as possible, so that way your agencies can benefit from them. So if we go back to the earlier slide with the GAO, the occupancy utilization levels, and the different percentages of how they were being occupied. If your agency is one of those thinking about, okay, I'm going to dramatically change how we use our space, and we're going to do it both in our headquarters. If you happen to have a regional presence in one of these prototype locations, I highly recommend you giving it a whirl as well. Now, the nice thing over here is that they're all across the country. Okay. 6 locations, many of them aligned with many of your regional offices already. And what you'll see in the slides, and don't worry, I'm not going to read all those bullets, is for each of these locations, like Tacoma, which is near Seattle, San Francisco, they're each a little bit different. So if you want to be the early adopter on workplace change and really looking at your workplace standards and hybrid work, Have your employees try multiple locations. You don't need to limit yourself just to one. And just try them out for a week or two and then compare notes and see which things you like. And we want to hear it. Now, the nice thing is about this is at no cost to your agency, but there is a catch. The catch being is we want data. We want your information on what worked well, what didn't work, and that kind of thing. And of course, your participation. So we have Tacoma, San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Kansas City. There's a bunch. And I'm going to pick on my friends over there from Region 8, Denver. So if you have any questions about Denver, and I did the bike storage and showers for the active commuter. I want to be an active commuter one day. They can answer your questions too. So essentially, it's all over the country. 6 locations, co-working sites. They're available now. You can reserve them now. You can go in there now, and they're just waiting for you. Okay. Now, again, audience participation time. If you want to learn more about co-working, right there for the last 3 rows, zoom into probably around 9.5 magnification, and it should click in. And if it doesn't, then certainly gsa.gov/workplace will have the answers for you. All right.
Targeting to come in first. You get three groups in there, that's the best way to get them familiar with what the space is, and they come back on one after that. But if you have groups in areas, those 6 areas to bring in, it really does work well. Have a meeting there, whatever, bring people with a sense of to kind of break the ice on what that is. That's kind of part of it.
Yep. All right. All right. Workplace engagements. This is the bread and butter of the workplace program. This is really what it's all about. Really going back to essentially a common misconception in workplace. We've done workplace engagements since 2006 or so. This isn't new. It's just there's new things to consider with hybrid work and telework and distributed organization and on and on and on. A common misconception about workplace engagements is that it's essentially space or just interior design. It's not. What it does is it really covers everything in that wheel, the workplace engagement wheel, and it's customized to the particular needs, both either at a project level or at a headquarters level for your agency. What we do is identify what your leaders are losing sleep over, how they, as far as their business goals, organizational goals, how the workplace improvements can possibly help them sleep a little bit better, and identify ways of improving things over the long term. So workplace engagement can very much focus just on business processes and human performance, focusing on organizational effectiveness, change management, distributed organization. Maybe your space standards are fine and you love them, but maybe you have some opportunities for improvement in other areas like technology. A workplace engagement looks at all of that, basically say, where's your organization at? What's working well? What's not working well on this effective workplace wheel? And how can we help you? And those are the services we provide. Now, here's just a few examples to reinforce that point is certainly design drawings, layouts, 3-dimensional walkthroughs, all that kind of stuff. When it comes to design principles, a key difference I do want to call out is the workplace engagement approach first uses, and Chuck talked about this earlier, a variety of different diagnostic research approaches. We want to know your agency's goals. We want to know how your employees are working. We want to know how they potentially could change and work, and essentially what aspects of that workplace wheel, again, are working or not working well. Now, part of that discussion is, of course, talking to your employees and talking to your leadership and your CIO and the stakeholders and all of that. All right. We get that information and then we get into the recommendations phase of it. It may very commonly include space design standards like this, and it may focus just on a specific location, or it may focus on an entire agency who's basically looking at rebooting their own design standards, in which case what we would do is collect data from targeted locations, use that to inform the design standards, create templates that would use, the agency can use, and then reapply those templates back to those locations that we talked to earlier, making things easier for you while using the benefits of all of our experience. It could include things like co-working. It could be looking at your portfolio footprint in Denver and say, okay, I got a bunch of active commuters. I want to go to Denver. Let's really look at the federal co-working and make that a conscious strategy for your real estate needs in that organization, maybe for Interior, USDA, or anyone else that happens to be in the area. Okay. A workplace engagement concern will certainly include furniture and equipment and all the things that we're kind of used to. And you're going to see a lot of that upstairs in the Workplace Innovation Lab. Now, technology is increasingly, we know that's increasingly important. And it's funny, the comment earlier from the CIO's office about getting in early. It's a colleague of mine, it's from TTS, from technology, and on the other side of GSA. And it's the questions we ask the PBS, our office, like, we want to learn more about technology and getting in. And it's the same thing. They say, we want to learn more about workplace, and technologists are saying that as well. So what we're doing is working with them more closely. So that way, if your engagement does say we need to look at technology as well, we can make sure that's included as well. Business process analytics, basic things, looking at work patterns and shifts over time as it relates to different degrees of telework. That's all the kind of stuff that we do pretty much in every engagement. And then certainly something as it relates to organizational culture. What you see here is an example from one of our consulting partners. The approach they take is essentially through talking to employees and leaders, do a type of mapping of different types of organizational culture, archetypes, if you will, and see where alignment is. Fortunately, in this organization, the employees and the leadership are pretty much in line, and the current and the future isn't very different. If you have the sense that your culture, what you think the culture is, might be very different than what your staff thinks the culture is, I highly recommend doing this type of assessment as well. Okay, so this should give you a taste of the different types of services that could be included in a workplace engagement. Here's the full list of it that you saw earlier with each of the examples. And we do have a lot of bandwidth to accommodate you, either through our in-house workplace strategists across the country, or through all of these consulting partners here, which are all eager, ready, and willing to help us out as far as whatever your workplace strategy needs may be. One last audience participation plug. If you want to sign up for a workplace engagement, feel free to scan that QR code. And this one particularly is, so as you can see, we have a lot of services available, and they can pretty much all be customized. So if you're dealing with how do we respond to this, or how do we look at our utilization more effectively, or occupancy, or embrace hybrid work in a meaningful way, well, we're right here to help. You can also email us at workplace@gsa.gov, talk to your account manager, visit gsa.gov/workplace. Pretty much anybody from GSA here, just give them a call. All right. Any questions out there? That was a blatant sales pitch. I know it. I was under orders to do that. I had to keep everyone awake this afternoon. Yes.
The engagement process be kind of concurrent with programming the design?
It could be. Quite honestly, it really depends on the nature of the changes you're looking at. If you are looking like a workplace engagement classic is, we need space requirements. We don't know what it is. We're going through changes. We need to go some soul searching beforehand. Ideally, the workplace engagement happens before design and requirements are even identified, because what we may find is that, to go back to this chart here, we may find in the exploration process that leadership and employees, there might be cultural schisms all over the place, and that might take some time to line up, which could inform different design decisions down the road. Now, that's the ideal situation.
Yeah,
Now, but we all recognize that timing isn't always perfect, and it really comes down to where you're at in that requirements design process. Later it is, if you're already into DIDs and that kind of thing, then you're kind of like, we might want to think about different things, softer touches, if you will. But if you're before that, there's usually a way. We just need to get a bit creative on the process.
Just to add on to that, I mean, early is the best, but this process, I think, is valid throughout whatever on-ramp we're getting into a project on, because it helps validate some of the decisions you may already have made that you still have time to retool. Even if you're in design development, you don't want to keep going forward with some wrong assumptions. So definitely the speed of it will increase further down the line you go, because you want to do it fast and get it quick, and you've got some more information handy. But the earlier you can do it, the better.
Any other questions? No. All right.
I see you want me.
Oh, was there one?
Anybody else? Oh, it's all in. Any other questions? Ryan has the answers.
I don't know
Chuck.
about that. Is there any questions online? Can we see those?
Any questions online? Who's monitoring that? No.
Darn it, I was expecting three to five questions this afternoon. All right,
Well,
Thank you.
everybody, please thank Ryan and Chuck. Thank you so much for your great presentation and bringing us actually to a close for today, but I have a few